Word. That very term, word, has meaning, doesn't it? We use words to communicate to one another. They are pronounced, they have meaning, they convey the intent, purpose, ideas that are on our inside we want to get out to others, either in written or in spoken form. Words. They are the vehicle of communication. The term word translates the Greek word logos in the New Testament, and it appears 40 times in the fourth book of the New Testament, the Gospel according to John, more than any other book of the New Testament aside from the book of Acts. And many times that term logos is used in reference to the person of Jesus Christ, or to his words themselves, the truthfulness of his word. And in the beginning of his gospel, John uses this term logos to refer to Jesus Christ. How fitting, how appropriate, how meaningful that God would reveal himself by the Word, not only in words, but in the essential Word of God. He who is the revelation of God in the most personal and wonderful way imaginable. My name is Michael Chandler, and I'm pastor of the Victor Valley Bible Church in Victorville, California. I'd like to welcome you to this Bible in a Day broadcast on the subject of Thank God for His Son. In the Gospel of John, chapter 1, and verses 1 through 18, we read this prologue to the 21 chapters of this Gospel. In the beginning, the author says, was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him, and cried out, saying, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. The Synoptic Gospels, the first three books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, record how one afternoon Jesus posed this question to his disciples. He asked them, Who do the crowds say that I am? Well, Jesus' disciples offered the varied opinions they'd been hearing from others. But then Jesus challenged them, asking, But who do you say that I am? In this single exchange, Jesus made two quite remarkable claims. First, he is controversial, and people's views of his identity will collide with one another. Second, what matters is not what people think of Jesus, but who do you say that he is? When it comes right down to it, you and I, individually, each one of us, must decide who Jesus Christ is, and what are the ramifications for that information, for that decision, that conclusion, based upon the evidence we have gathered. Of all the significant personalities marching through time, there is but one person who remains the most controversial character in the history of mankind. In their volume, Who's Bigger? Where Historical Figures Really Rank, published back in 2013 by Cambridge University Press, co-authors Stephen Scienna, a computer science professor at Stony Brook University, and Charles Ward, an engineer on the ranking team at Google, determined that Jesus is the most historically significant person ever. They collected some 840,000 names of significant persons throughout history and determined that of all of these, Jesus ranks the highest. It seems fitting then, doesn't it, that one should consider him, and from what better sources than his closest associates, those who witnessed his life and walked and talked with him. The author of the Gospel of John is the record of one of these. For he says, "This is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things." And we know that his testimony is true. John 21:24. John would therefore have us be well informed, that we may know the most significantly historical person ever. John's legacy includes his gospel account and 3 letters. His pen also bequeathed the book of Revelation. The first of these was written, he says, quote, "that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." John 20:31. His first letter was written as a follow-up, writing in 1 John 5:13, "that you may know that you have eternal life and that you may continue to believe in the name of the Son of God." The author, therefore, would first have us believe and then be assured that our faith in what we believe is genuine. At the heart of these is his theme that Jesus is the Son of God. What is the meaning of this designation, Son of God? Is it a way of ascribing deity to a man? After all, Caesar Augustus was called the Son of God, his father Julius Caesar being deified after his assassination. But Jesus, according to the Scriptures, was worshipped as divine before his death. Matthew 8 speaks of how a leper came to Jesus, pleading with him and worshiping him, saying, "Jesus, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out, touched him, and said, "I am willing, be cleansed." One evening, actually one very early morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus was walking on the stormy waters of the Sea of Galilee to his disciples' boat. And when it was all over, they bowed and worshipped him, saying, "You are the Son of God." Matthew 14:33. Jesus accepted their worship in every case. He was certainly no son of a dead deity. In John 6:69, the disciples say, "We have come to believe that you are the Son of the living God." Some would offer a mythological opinion to explain this phrase, Son of God, suggesting that Jesus was the fruit of a sexual union between a divine father and a divine mother. Well, naturally, first-century Jews would have rejected any allegiance to such pagan notions. Still others say that the title Son of God points to Jesus' supposed angelic origin. Ostensibly, Lucifer, who became known more popularly as Satan, and Jesus were accordingly brothers. But the latter was honored and loved by God, their Father. The New Testament, however, teaches that Jesus was no angel at all, but the creator of angels. Colossians 1:16 speaks of how he is the one who made these various beings. Just listen as the Apostle Paul speaks of the elevated nature of Jesus Christ, saying that he is the image of the invisible God, Colossians 1:15 and following. The firstborn that is the most honored over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible. And then he speaks of angelic beings, using phrases like thrones, dominions, principalities, powers. All things were created through him and for him. He made angels, and he made them for himself. And so the author to the Hebrews writes in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6, beginning in verse 5, to which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my son, today I've begotten you, and again I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son"? And when he again brings the firstborn into the world, God says, "Let all the angels of God worship him." And of the angels, he says, he makes his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire. Additionally, as I mentioned, Jesus accepted worship. No angel would accept worship, but Jesus did. In John 9, Jesus heals a man who was born blind. Seeing him later, the man who was born blind says, "I believe," and he worshipped Jesus, John 9:38. Was Jesus the Son of God in the sense that he was human? Now get this. Being created by God, Adam, the first man, is referred to as, quote, the Son of God, Luke 3:38. In the end of the genealogy, going all the way back from Mary's father, Jesus' mother, all the way back to Genesis and Adam, whom the author calls the Son of God. All human beings, naturally, and rightly so, are called, and rightly called, sons of God, children of God, by natural generation. Being, as Paul says in Acts 17:29, the offspring of God. Now, isn't that interesting? Yes, you and I are sons of God in a very general sense. We descended from Adam, who was created in the image of God, by the hand of God, and is called the Son of God by creation. We are the offspring of God. Paul makes that clear when he preaches the gospel to the Athenian philosophers on Mars Hill, Acts 17, as I said, Acts 17, verse 29. Jesus, however, stands out as truly unique. Though there was certainly nothing lacking in his humanity, the name Son of God in his case was much more significant. For he is called the Son of Man and the Son of the living God. He asked his disciples, "Who do the crowd say that the Son of Man is?" referring to himself. And then he asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter responds, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Son of Man, Son of God. Matthew 16, verses 13 and 16. The fourth book of the New Testament refers to two fundamental realities. First, Jesus is essentially divine. He and the Father equally share the same attributes of deity. Jesus Christ is God. Indeed, it was this very claim, along with his breaking the strict rabbinic rules of the Sabbath, for which the Jewish leadership turned him over for crucifixion. This exchange back and forth with Jesus, between Jesus and his detractors, is woven throughout John's Gospel. In John chapter 5 and verse 17, Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath, and the Jews were upset about it. But Jesus says in John 5:17, "My Father has been working until now, and I have been working." And so the writer says the Jews sought all the more to kill him because he not only broke the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Now note, we'll come to this over and over again, but the Jews understood Jesus' claim that he was not saying, I am the Son of God like everybody else is. You guys are sons of God. I'm a son of God. I'm a human being. I'm a descendant of Adam just like you are a human being, a descendant of Adam. We're all kind of children of God. He wasn't claiming that he was some sort of mythological fruit of a sexual union between a divine father and a divine mother. That was ridiculous. He wasn't claiming that he was entitled to some phrase, Son of God, as Julius Caesar or Augustus would have claimed. He wasn't claiming some angelic position as a son of God. The Jews would have written these ideas off altogether. No, when they understood that Jesus was claiming to be the Son of God, that he and the Father had this relationship, they understood, rightly so, that Jesus was claiming essential equality with God, that I am divine. Had Jesus meant something less than that, he would have immediately cleared up the confusion and said, wait. No, I'm not saying that I'm equal with God or that I have some kind of special, essential equality with God, that I have the same attributes of God. I'm not claiming deity. If Jesus was not claiming deity, he would have made that very clear to them. But that clearly was not the case at all. The Jews understood Jesus' claim to be divine. In John chapter 8, and verse 56, Jesus says, Abraham, your father Abraham, rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. The Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. There Jesus again is claiming, I am. I am, that is Yahweh. I am, essentially, he's saying the same being, the same person who spoke to Moses from the burning bush. I am. Remember, God spoke to Moses saying, I am has sent you. In John chapter 10, beginning in verse 30, Jesus is claiming essential equality with God again. I and my Father are one. Now some will look at that and interpret, well, yes, Jesus and the Father are of one purpose, they're of one mind, they have one ambition, one goal, they share the same purpose. You know, Jesus came to save people. We want people to be saved too. This kind of a thing. I and the Father are of one basic mind and intent. Well, that's not what Jesus meant. We know that's not what Jesus meant because the Jews, it says, in the very next verse, John 10:31, took up stones again to stone him. But Jesus answered them, many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of these works do you stone me? The Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. They understood that Jesus was claiming essential equality with God. In fact, in John 19 and verse 7, they brought Jesus to the governor, Pilate, to be crucified, and they cried out for his blood. And in John 19:7, the Jews answered Pilate, saying, we have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. Also, by accepting the title Son of God, Jesus showed his submission to the will of his Father, not only claiming essential equality with God, but also that he was speaking in terms of his relationship to God the Father as a son in complete submission to the will of his Father. He said in John 4:34, for example, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." In John 6 and verse 38, again, Jesus says, "I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of the Father who sent me." John 6:38. In John 17 and verse 4, Jesus is praying to the Father and says, "I have glorified you on the earth. I have finished the work which you have given me to do." Jesus Christ, the perfect Son, possessed his Father's nature and obeyed his Father's will. Jesus, the Son of God. With such truths, the author of the inspired record fills his prologue, as I read in John 1, verses 1 through 18. He writes of Jesus before his incarnation, being with God, being God, verses 1 through 2. He writes of him being the very person by whom all things were created, without whom nothing was made that was made, verses 3 through 5. He was so recognized by the man who came to bear witness, namely John the Baptist, who was sent from God that all might believe through him. John 1, verses 6 through 8. Later, in that same passage, John 1, 1 through 18, John bore witness saying that this Jesus is preferred before me because he was before me. Now, this is very curious because the gospel records elsewhere say that John was born 6 months before Jesus, that Elizabeth bore her son, Jesus' cousin, John, 6 months before Jesus was born. How then could John the Baptist say that Jesus was before me? John was born before Jesus. John understood that Jesus' existence preceded his. John was born and was born into the world, as you and I would be born into the world, 6 months before Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. But he existed. He has an eternal past. And John understood that he is preferred before me because he was before me. He has always been face to face with God, the eternal God, before me. But the flow of John's prologue is sadly interrupted by a strange fact. The people of the world, though utterly dependent upon Jesus Christ for life, it says in John 1, 9 and 10, did not know him. The world was made through him, yet the world did not know him, did not experience him, did not have knowledge of him that would change their lives. Jesus even came to his own people, the Jews, neither did they receive him, verse 11. Yet even in the face of this rejection, the promise prevails, John 1, 12 through 13, that as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who are believing in his name, who are born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. That passage there, John 1, 12 through 13, anticipates Jesus' later teaching in John 3 on the new birth, speaking to Nicodemus, saying, "Unless you are born again, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." John then drives home his theme, Jesus, the Son of God, saying that the one who was with God in the eternal past became flesh in time and space that he might bring grace. Grace upon grace. This, the most significant historical person ever, offers a relationship with God to all who will trust their eternal souls into his wonderful saving care. This is Jesus, the Son of God, and I invite you to receive him today, perhaps even this Thanksgiving season, because he is God's indescribable gift to us, the gift of eternal life through his Son, Jesus Christ. Let me encourage you to hide away in your heart John 1 and verse 12. Again, that to as many as received him, to them Jesus gave the right to become children of God to those who believe in his name. John 1:12. Again, my name is Michael Chandler, pastor of the Victor Valley Bible Church in Victorville, California, where we worship every Sunday morning at 10:15, meeting at 16439 Hughes Road in Victorville. Our services are live streamed on Facebook starting at about 11 o'clock. For more information, please visit our website, located at www.victorvalleybiblechurch.org, or if you wish to email, my email address is bibletrom@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you as you live out the Bible in these days.